Hi everyone, my name is Matthew J. Metzger. I am an asexual and transgender author of over 25 LGBT novels, and I'm here today with the Leeds LGBT Literature Festival to commemorate Idaho, the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia. The theme this year is breaking the silence, and while there are so many silences that do need to be broken about how the LGBT community is treated in modern society, the thing I want to talk about in this brief video and do a reading for is the importance of that silence being broken on an individual's own terms. Something I have noticed as a trans man is that I'm a very private person, and I don't necessarily want everybody in my life to know that I'm transgender, but once you come out once, it starts to spiral. And we're still in a world where trans people are seen very much at best as a curiosity. So that means it's very hard to only come out on terms that are acceptable to you. And that's really something that I channeled into this book. So I'm doing a short reading from Bump, and Bump is a story about David, a trans man who accidentally falls pregnant. And David is intensely private as a person. He very much does not want to talk about his identity or his trans history. He is simply David, that's how he identifies, and that's it. So being put in a position with his pregnancy where he's forced to come out and break that silence is very, very challenging for him, and it was very challenging to write. And I'm just going to read for you a short extract where David is coming out to his boss, not because he wants to, but because he has to. And it really does go into how David sees himself and his identity and the challenge that coming out and having that silence taking away from him is posing. It was his last appointment of the day, and he showed both Mr. Masters and the inspector out before packing up his kit and nipping into the staff toilet to change. He had to get up his nerves for the conversation he was about to have. David didn't make a habit of coming out. It was an endless, exhausting process and never ended well. Once he started to consistently pass, he simply stopped. The only people he told in the last 10 years were his partners. Work had never known, the neighbours didn't know, the quiz team didn't know, the gym certainly didn't know. Nobody else knew, and that was exactly the way David liked it. So telling Sonia was going to be against everything he'd worked for, and being outed by his own body was going to be something he hadn't experienced in nearly a decade. Still, he'd chosen his clothes carefully that morning. A tight t-shirt he usually wore at home to wind Ryan up with a bit of a show. Low-slung jeans that gave the impression of narrower hips than he really had, and a bigger cock than he'd ever get. Workman's boots. He oozed masculinity, and he oozed it on purpose. It helped, all right? It just helped. Once the inspector's car had pulled out of the car park, he crossed it to the shelter, ducking through the door and heading to the little office off to the side. Sure enough, he found Sonia buried in papers, her glasses almost falling off the end of her nose, looking flustered but pleased. "Go okay?" he asked. She jumped. "David! Good gracious, I thought you'd already left." Yes, they seemed... well, we'll see." "It'll have gone fine," he said. "Can I take a seat?" "Of course, dear." He closed the door, and Sonia paused in her scribbling. "Is something the matter?" "I need to discuss something with you. Confidentially." Her smile dropped. "Nothing serious, I hope." He shrugged, sinking into the chair in front of her desk. "I'm going to need to take parental leave from the beginning of November." Her face lit up. "Oh, that's exciting." "My partner and I are expecting a baby." "Congratulations," she gushed. "Is she due in November then?" "He's not," David said carefully. "I am." Silence. "I'm sorry, what?" "I'm due in November." "You?" "I'm transgender," David said, his chest starting to tighten. He so rarely said those words, so rarely even thought them, because for so long he hadn't called himself anything but a man. It felt so strange. "I'm transgender, and I recently found out I'm pregnant." "Oh my goodness," Sonia said, jaw sagging. "You're... really?" He winced at the incredulity in her tone. "I never would have guessed." He bit back on the urge to say that had rather been the point. "And you're he? I thought you had a stepdaughter." "I do. His daughter." She stammered something completely incomprehensible, then put down her pen and waved both hands in front of her face, going pink. "I'm so sorry, I must sound like a blithering idiot," she said in a rush. "You know me, David. It's totally fine with me, you know, and people are people, and please don't give me a lecture about how love is love and you're an ally, and you saw a gay couple holding hands that one time and thought it was sweet," David said, a little too harshly. "I don't need to hear how my lifestyle is acceptable." The pink deepened to red. "Well, yes, I don't want anyone to know for as long as possible." "It's nothing to be ashamed, Sonia." He snapped her name, and she fell quiet. "I'm not ashamed of who I am," he said, "but I am a private man, and I have no interest in all and sundry asking about the state of my genitals and what name is written on my birth certificate for the rest of my working life. I do not want people to know." She nodded dumbly. "I'm well aware my own body will give everything away before I go on leave. When the time comes, I will handle that. I don't want you to tell anyone." "Of course, this is all confidential." "Except for gossip. We all knew when Paul was getting divorced, but he never told a soul." She coughed awkwardly. They both knew how bad the place was for gossip, and David had no illusions he'd be spared. "I'll put in the leave request form a bit closer to the time," David said. "I've not decided yet how long I'll take off." "Take all the time you need." "I will." He knew he was being rude, but he didn't particularly care. It wasn't like he didn't already have a reputation for being sharp. His colleagues were persistently bewildered by all the customers liking him, and couldn't imagine him being nice and fluffy with them when he was such a git with the staff. But honestly, David thought it was easily explained. His colleagues were nosy. His clients didn't give a shit who he was, as long as he had a certificate on the wall and the impression that he too thought their precious fluffles was the most important creature in the universe. "I'll keep you informed if anything changes," he said, and pushed up from the chair. "Thanks." Yes, congratulations again." "Thank you." He closed the door behind him and had to take a fortifying breath before he could release the handle. If anything, that had been the easy one. Ryan's family were going to be much, much harder. If you'd like to read more of Bump, you can find it on my website, www.matthewjmetzger.com, along with every other book I've ever written. And that's just a short extract to drive home a little bit that while we do need to break the silences that keep our community in the shadows, and we do need to make a world where coming out doesn't have any of those negative connotations or possibilities, we also need to make sure that when we break silence, we're doing it on the individual's terms that they need to be able to work with. We're not all out and proud. We don't all want to be. And we as a community need to respect and remember that. But most of all, we need to come out from those shadows as a community and fight for the rights that are still in danger or still haven't existed for so many of us around the world. So that's why days like Idaho are really important. Go out and show some love for your LGBT friends and family, and most importantly, in the current environment, stay safe.